My prediction for A Christmas Carol is that you're going to get a question on Scrooge. The other advantage of revising for Scrooge is that knowledge of his character is going to inform any essay they chuck at you, even if it's about the Cratchits. Well, the Cratchits are only relevant insofar as they interact with Scrooge, so revising Scrooge is definitely going to hit either 100% of the question or most of it. Another clue that Scrooge is going to be there is that Scrooge was on the specimen paper of 2014, and I kind of think that AQA are running out of ideas, and more importantly, they won't want to shock you during a pandemic year with a question on minor characters. Again, if the question is on a theme, all those themes are interpreted through what happens to Scrooge. So Scrooge is our banker. But the world and her dog study A Christmas Carol these days because it is the easiest of the texts on offer, and therefore everybody's going to be equally well prepared. Or are they? Maybe not. So let's think of some ideas about Scrooge that the rest of the country won't be writing about. Number one on my list, is Scrooge a psychologically convincing portrayal? Most people would argue no, he's kind of a stock character who changes from this terrible miser, who's such a miser we can't really believe that a real person would be that awful, and then he changes into this wonderful individual who becomes a second father to Tiny Tim and gives away loads of his money and laughs for the rest of his life. It seems a psychologically unconvincing change and alteration. Many critics, in fact, think that it's contrived and not realistic at all. However, if we think Scrooge is reacting this way because of his patterns of attachment, in particular to the relationship with his father when he was young, suddenly everything makes sense. So what we have is the removal of the father figure at the beginning, when we have this portrayal of Scrooge abandoned at school in this old Christmas where he sits alone. Then when he's rescued and returns back to the family home, the father doesn't arrive to bring him there. So the father is still an absent figure. And then we get to the end of the novel where Scrooge becomes a second father to Tiny Tim. That's almost the last line of the novel. And so we can see that fatherhood is central to Scrooge's journey, but also a central theme of what Dickens is writing about here. He's writing about the need for this individual, Scrooge, to become a better father figure, but he's also using that as a metaphor for how the reader needs to become a father-like figure to the poor and the working classes. Another interesting perspective is, when does Scrooge change? Traditionally, we see it as this moment in the graveyard where the ghost of Christmas yet to come shows him his own grave. There's a massive build-up to that in Stave 4, when he's constantly given clues that it's himself who has died and he misses those clues. However, he first asks about what will happen to Tiny Tim to the ghost of Christmas present in Stave 3. If we think there are 5 staves in the book, it's exactly in the middle of the book in Stave 3 that this transformation starts. That makes it much more believable. Another major theme that's often overlooked with Scrooge is how much he pays Bob Cratchit. He pays Bob Cratchit 15 shillings a week, which is considerably more than Fred will be paid in his first job. Now, Dickens is very precise about the salaries characters will get because he's making a really interesting point. The wages that Scrooge is paying to Bob Cratchit are no worse than the wages Bob Cratchit would get anywhere else. He is in fact paying the going rate. Now that's important because Scrooge is now being used as, on the one hand, this disgusting miserly figure and an indication of immoral behaviour, but on the other hand, Dickens is saying, well, here's this vile character, Scrooge, but he's actually just like the real world. This is what real employers are currently paying to real workers, and real workers are like the Cratchits who can't survive on the wages that they are being given. That's why we're invited into the Cratchit home, to see them making the most out of their poverty. And that's why just a tiny bit more money changes the destiny of Tiny Tim to the extent that he actually survives and doesn't die. So Dickens uses the character of Scrooge to show how appalling his good readers are. You know, his readers are Christian, they believe they're acting in a moral way, but actually he's saying, yes, you might have all these finer feelings towards your fellow man, but it doesn't actually translate into money, into action. And the best way to improve society isn't through charity, it's through paying a decent wage. That is the underlying, slightly hidden message of the novel. That's another reason why Dickens focuses on Scrooge as an employer, and we get the parallel with FEZZIWIG as an employer. FEZZIWIG isn't just there as this wonderful example of a man who knows to have fun and treat his workers well at Christmas. He's there as a model for how employers should treat their employees. And that lasts far beyond Christmas. Another aspect about Scrooge which isn't normally focused on by most candidates is why he finds it so difficult to form relationships. Belle accuses him of being in love with the golden idol of wealth. But money itself is just a symbol of security. When we look at Scrooge's life, he actually leads a poor life. He doesn't spend anything on his own heating. He only eats gruel. He lives in very few rooms in his house, which isn't lit properly. And so despite his wealth, he actually leads the life of a poor person. This is also revealed in Stave 4 when we meet all the characters who are stealing everything that they could find in his house. So we've got the undertaker, the charwoman and the laundress, but they come away with remarkably little. Scrooge doesn't own much. And so we can see his miserliness is actually caused by his lack of personal relationships, which started with his abandonment. First, he's abandoned by his mother, who we must assume has died. Then he's abandoned by his father. Then he's abandoned by his lovely sister, who also dies. And therefore he becomes scared to form any personal relationships. At the end of the novel, those relationships are restored through Fred. And Fred acts as a kind of counterpoint or balance to Scrooge. He becomes, in a way, Scrooge's teacher. He teaches Scrooge what relationships are for and how they can transform your future and your feelings about yourself. So that's ample to get a grade 9 and write an essay that no one else is writing. Everyone else will be writing about the ghosts and how Dickens wanted to stop poverty through charity and how he wanted to change the political views of his readers, perhaps to stop them being Malthusian economists. You can stick that stuff in as well, but unless 300,000 Year 11 students watch this video, you're going to be different to everyone else. Now you're probably wondering what the best quotations are on Scrooge. They're coming up now. Ring the bell, subscribe. Good luck in your exam.